I just wanted to start by saying thank you for coming. This was very unexpected in my mind when I posted a month ago that it had been 10 years since I had cancer. I never thought that this would grow into a gathering of friends that wanted to hear more. So thank you. That's a blessing to me, just to have amazing friends that want to hear my story. And I hope it's encouraging to everyone also. And I thought we would just start by praying. So I'll go ahead and do that. Dear Lord, thank you for this gathering of women. I just thank you that you've blessed me with so many wonderful relationships and friendships and people that care and want to hear more about me. And I pray that you would use this time to glorify you. I just thank you that you've given me the opportunity to share about what you've done in my life. And I also just wanted to pray for the law that has recently passed in New York. Part of my testimony is growing up in New York and losing babies, and I just pray that you would overturn that law. I know there's many that are upset about it, and just protect the unborn, Lord. And use this time for your glory and your honor. In your name, amen. So I just wanted to start by saying I'm no one special. Anything amazing in my life or story would definitely be because of Jesus. There's nothing that I could contribute. If it wasn't for him, I certainly wouldn't be here. And so I'm a great sinner saved by a greater Savior. And so I just pray that this would be all glory to him. And one of the verses that has struck me in my life is Galatians 2:20. I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. And I just remember in college, I had read that verse and was walking to class and just pondering it, and it was just like the Lord, kind of like a light bulb moment. It's not me, it's Christ in me. It's not me trying to live the Christian life, it's Christ is already in me, his life, his spirit, and I live it by faith. And I think whether that's in the big moments of life or everyday moments of cleaning up messes, just having faith that he is in me, he's walking through me, talking through me. I don't know how, but he is, and he uses his children. And so I think if I could pull out a theme of my testimony, it would be just living by faith and trusting in him, even when you can't see. So I wanted to start by just saying how I became a Christian. I was raised in a Catholic home. We grew up Catholic, went to Mass on Sundays, and I always, as a kid, I always kind of wanted to know God. I desired to know him. I desired to please him in some ways. If my parents weren't going one Sunday or whatever, I would ask if my grandma would take me to Mass, or I would read children's Bibles and just wanted to know him. But I certainly didn't know that you could have a personal relationship with God. And I remember giving up sucking my thumb for Lent when I was 7. Gave it up. I was just a good Catholic girl. So,
nothing else worked.
Yeah, I gave it up for Lent. We went to religious ed classes every week, but my knowledge of the Bible was very limited. I remember in high school I was dating a boy, and he was a Methodist boy, and he was playing Judas in the Easter play at his church, and everyone's kind of laughing like, haha, he's Judas. And I didn't really get it. Like, I just didn't even understand who Judas was. And so just very limited knowledge of who who God is, who the Bible, or what was in the Bible. And then, I went through the sacraments, First Communion, confirmation. And then when I was 16, there was a pastor that moved in next door to my grandparents, a Protestant pastor. And through him and his wife reaching out to my grandparents and inviting them to church and the Christmas production, they started to attend their church. And it was a trickle-down effect through our family. My parents started to go, and my uncle and aunt started to go, and then I eventually started to go, although it was very different for me compared to a mass. And I just remember they had a banner up in their church, and it was John 3:16, and that was totally new to me. I had never read that verse, and I remember it hitting me. For God to love the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whosoever would believe in him will not perish but have eternal life. My parents gave me my first Bible. It had red letters for where Jesus talked, and I just remember thinking, well, that must be important, so I'll read those words. And I read it over and over until the Gospels fell out of my Bible. And we got baptized at that church. And then shortly thereafter, it was a year or two later, I went to a Christian college. I hadn't planned to. I was planning to go to a public college and had gotten accepted to several. And then through another friend who was a Christian, and just through mailing that Liberty University sent out, I just felt like that's where I needed to be, and so I ended up going to Liberty. Total culture shock when I got there. I had never been around so many Christians in my life. I came from a public high school in upstate New York, and my first semester I was in New Testament honors, and I had just learned what John 3:16 was, and I just learned the Gospels, and all of a sudden I was with people that had grown up in the faith and knew their Bible, and just things that now I take for granted. But so it was a hard, steep learning curve. But by the end of my 4 years, I was on student leadership. I had met Jesse. We got married the fall after we graduated. And so I learned a lot about the Word and the Bible. And so I wanted to read. Mom actually doesn't know about this because I was going to surprise her, but now she'll know a little bit about it. But the pastor that moved in next to my grandparents, his wife is writing a book, and she asked if she could use our story in that book. And so it's not published yet, but I was going to give it to you as a gift when it was published. But she actually wrote about my grandparents. And try not to cry, but we'll see how it goes. And so this is just a little bit of what she wrote. And her book is called Come and Go, and it's about the different people she has met throughout her time in ministry. John and Pat were an elderly couple who used to live next door to us. We enjoyed getting to know them through occasional friendly conversation in the driveway or across the backyard. Because of their age, my husband Jerry helped them by plowing the heavy New York snow that blanketed our community every winter. A delicious homemade apple pie was always their way of saying thanks. One December, we brought them a plate of Christmas cookies and invited them to our church Christmas production. They heartily agreed and attended. To our surprise, they did not stop after Christmas, but continued coming, and sometime later joined our church's membership class. Jerry explained to them that in order to be a member of our church, one must first be a member of God's family. John and Pat were religious people who had heard the gospel on other occasions in our church, but never made a personal decision to follow Jesus. What a joy it was to welcome them into the family of God as they put their trust in Jesus as Savior. Not long after that, their sons and daughters-in-law followed their example and all joined God's family. John and Pat were involved in our church for several years. We grew to love them and felt blessed to have John and Pat as wonderful neighbors. In time, their son Gary received God's call to nursing home ministry. God used him to encourage many elderly people and lead them to Christ. Their granddaughter Kelly, who had also committed her life to Christ, attended a Christian university and responded to God's call upon her life. She and her husband Jesse serve in a ministry translating the Bible into tribal languages through which many people in other nations will receive the gospel. We thank God for helping us recognize those beautiful treasures living right next door. One night we noticed the lights of an ambulance flashing next door, and we rushed to check on our precious friends. To our surprise, the paramedics were frantically working to resuscitate our friend Pat. I wiped away tears as I watched the sad scene unfold in front of me. Pat slipped into eternity that very night. Though it was difficult to let her go, we were thankful for our relationship with her, and even more so for her personal relationship with Jesus. Though we initially may share Jesus with one individual, God sees entire families, cities, and nations, and he intends the gospel to come to all. So that's just kind of through her eyes what kind of happened through our family. So that was my testimony. I'll get into cancer. Cancer begins, I was 23, newly married. We had just graduated Liberty, and Jesse was going to attend seminary. So we decided to move to Boston, north of Boston, and he was going to go to Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. So I had the task of paying the way. So I interviewed and got a full-time job as a career coordinator working in Boston. I was helping people with mental illness find employment. I would help them prepare for interviews, schedule interviews, get them to the interview, whatever they needed, write their resume. So I was doing that, and things were going well, and he started his first semester there. And about 3 months into his first semester at seminary, I found out that the career coordinating department of this nonprofit was being laid off due to budget cuts. So we were going to be losing our jobs a few weeks before Christmas. So I began looking for another job during that time. And it was actually the last week of work. I went in. It was about a 40-minute drive to the office. And I kind of just sat down abruptly on my chair. It was kind of like a wooden chair like this. And I had this shooting pain up my stomach. And I thought, that's weird. You know, it was very painful. And so I got up and I went to the bathroom, and I came back, and I kind of just sat down abruptly again just to see. And I had another shooting pain. And I thought, that's not normal. So this was before anyone had smartphones. I MapQuested my way to the ER. I wasn't very familiar with that area, and so I left work, I went to the ER, and I was there most of the day by myself. Jesse was at class and 40 minutes away. And so I remember the doctor kind of feeling my stomach, and he was like, "Is your bladder really full?" And I was, "Not really, no." And so they weren't sure if it was my appendix or what it might be. So they did several tests. They did a CAT scan. And by the end of the night, Jesse met me, and they said that it was 2 very large cysts on my ovary, softball size or grapefruit size, depending on if you're a girl or boy. So boys usually say softball, but so he referred me to a gynecologist, and I went there the next day, and he was kind of nonchalant about it. He was like, "Well, I could put you on birth control, and that might help shrink it, and we could just see if that works." And I remember I must have Googled, ovarian cysts or something, and I told him, "Well, I know these are very large, and if they twist, I'll be in severe pain if they twist around my ovary." And he's like, "You're right. I think I'll refer you to a gynecologic oncologist." And so he did. And the next day, or within the next few days, I had another appointment there, which I'm so glad he did. I'm glad we didn't wait. And I'm just grateful that I was working near Boston and I was at work when it happened, because I ended up with this amazing world-renowned doctor in gynecologic cancers, and he was an amazing man of faith too. And so he gave me an MRI and he scheduled me for immediate surgery. And I brought, it's kind of weird looking back on these pictures because you forget how big they were. At least in my mind, it's like, oh wow, so this is just my MRI, and I'll pass it around, but this is a side view, and this is my stomach and my back, and this was one of the cysts, and there's a smaller one behind it. And then this was the front view, and this was the larger cyst. It took up most of my stomach. So I'll just pass this around if you want to look. So anyways, on December 16th, I had lost my job. I went in for surgery. They were able to remove both cysts. My left ovary and fallopian tube were too damaged to save. But everything was intact and removed. And I had 20 staples and a 7-inch incision from my navel down. I was able to go home and rest. My parents were there. And 2 days before Christmas, I was able to get the staples out and drive to New York to be with my family that Christmas. And then the Lord provided through Jesse's church that he grew up in. They gave us the payments to continue my health insurance through Cobra for several months so that it wouldn't be a huge cost to us. So we got back after Christmas, and I was still recovering, didn't have a job, but the Lord again provided through a connection at the seminary. A lady knew of a family looking for somebody to come live with her mother who had Alzheimer's, and so I already had Alzheimer's experience from working with a lady when I was in college. So I interviewed with them and got the position. We moved into her attic, and I spent the next several months just driving her to doctor appointments and making her meals and helping her, clean and stay clean. And so that was a good provision for us. It allowed Jesse to continue doing school. We were wanting to have kids, and after such an experience, we thought, well, maybe we should try soon, just in case. We didn't know what was going to happen. So we asked the doctor, and he said, yes, you can go ahead and try. And so 4 months after the surgery, I became pregnant with Anna. I remember the doctor called me from the operating room to congratulate me. And so I continued to have checkups at the oncologist office. And I would bring Anna with me. She was only a couple months old. She had a smooth pregnancy, no issues, just a blessing.
Can we just go back to the surgery for a second?
Oh, sure, yes.
I think the most miraculous thing was when they removed the cyst, the cancer was inside the cyst, and it was completely surrounded by the cyst. So that's what really saved Kelly from the cancer spreading throughout her body. And the one thing that I just wanted to mention was when they removed the cysts and the cancer inside it, the cysts were in a perfect shape of a heart. And the doctor took a picture of that, and he could not believe it. It was engulfed or encapsulated in a perfect heart-shaped cyst. So, and that's what, when they removed all of that, she was cancer-free at that point.
Yeah. Wow. Yes. I didn't need any chemo or anything.
Nothing.
They still don't know why I had that cancer at that age. It's very rare. so I would take Anna as a little 2-3 month old to the checkups with me, and the oncology office is not the most hopeful little doctor's office to visit, and so she kind of would brighten up everyone's face, and people were worried if she had cancer. I was like, no, it's not her, she's okay. But so after one of those visits, the hospital called me, and they were looking for inspirational stories for a new advertising campaign that they were doing. And they heard about me and my story, and so they wanted to know if they could interview me and use my story. So I said, sure. So they interviewed me, and then I had to go in and get photographed like 300 times. It was like professional modeling, and give me your serious face while holding the baby and all this stuff, and it was not easy. But so they used, we were on like bus wraps, we were on websites, Boston.com, we were on several local newspapers, and on some billboards in Boston. So I brought a picture of our billboard. We drove and found it one night. There it is!
It was beautiful. Absolutely cute.
And then I also brought, this was one of the newspaper articles that I had found.
Did they give you photos though?
They let me do I could pick 2, of the 300, so I picked my 2 favorites.
Wow.
I know. It was kind of, but I should have brought the other one. I think the one I picked was this one. And then there was a more serious one. I picked 2. But anyway, that. So after Jesse graduated, Anna was about a year old. We decided we could not live in Boston any longer. The cost of living was too high. So our plan was to move back in with his parents in Colorado. And he was applying for doctoral programs. So we were going to wait and see if he got accepted and where he got accepted, and then go from there. So that's what we did. We moved back to Colorado. He ended up going on a 3-week trip to Israel with his dad, and I stayed with Anna and his mom. And so while he was gone, I found out I was pregnant again. So I was very excited, kind of told him on the phone. And but a couple weeks later, I got a phone call from my parents that Grandma Pat, who I read about, had passed away unexpectedly. And so I had just done her a care package that morning. And so we made plans to fly back to New York. And Jesse he was coming back from Israel, so he met us in New York. And so the day I arrived with Anna, I started to bleed. And I thought, that was just a spot, Lord, please don't let it continue. But the next day, it continued and it got heavier. And so we had to actually leave the funeral and go to the ER. And they confirmed it was a miscarriage. The baby was about 7 weeks along, and there's no heartbeat. So obviously that was a very sad time, and had to come back to Colorado after that. And just, very hard to, especially your first miscarriage. I feel like you don't think it will happen, and when it does, it's just kind of devastating. And so a month later, I found out I was pregnant again. And I was not expecting that, but hopeful and grateful that, okay, pregnant again. And this time I had more morning sickness. I had some more symptoms that I hadn't had with the miscarriage, so I was more hopeful that this was a healthy baby. But about 9 weeks along, again, I think I went to the bathroom or something, and I literally fell off the toilet in pain. I could not get up. I didn't know what was going on. I was calling for Jesse. And that whole night, I just had a shooting pain, and I think I was in denial that it was not the baby. So I was taking like gas medicine all night long. Like, this is just bad gas pain, you know? And the next morning, I was screaming in pain. Like I laid in certain positions. And so I told Jesse, I think I need to go to the ER. This is not, just bad gas or something. So by the time I went to it's good that I went. I probably should not have waited so long. But by the time I got there, they had to give me morphine right away so I could lay down. And they did an ultrasound. They found that it was a ruptured ectopic. I had a liter of free flow blood in my abdomen, and I needed 4 units of blood and immediate surgery. So the lady on call was a Christian doctor. She came in and prayed over us, and she told me, you've already lost 1 ovary and fallopian tube. An ectopic is when the baby implants inside the fallopian tube. So since you only have 1 left, you likely won't be able to have any more children, and you might need a hysterectomy. So I went into surgery with that in mind, and I came out, and she told me that somehow the baby had moved from the healthy fallopian tube, crossed my uterus, and implanted where there was already the damaged side. She said that happens in 0.02% of ectopic pregnancies, and I was still able to have children. I didn't need a hysterectomy or anything. I was to wait a year before trying. But then the other miracle of that was the day before I went in for surgery, my health insurance started through my mom and my mom's health insurance. So that saved me $45,000 at least. So just a lot of miracles. I then had a 4-inch horizontal scar from that surgery. So I now have a cross on my abdomen. I like to think of it as a personal reminder that the Lord is with me. I can trust Him even in cancer offices, in loneliness and layoffs and lost children. David was born the next year, healthy. And then I've had 2 more healthy babies and 2 more miscarriages. The other 2 miscarriages were early on, and my body was able to take care of them without needing surgery or anything. So I have a baby after cancer, and I have 3 rainbow babies after miscarriage. So Jesse, to go back to him, he didn't get accepted to doctoral programs. So plan D was he got a job as a IT specialist. He has a background in technology. So he worked at a job in Colorado, and we settled there. About 2 or 3 years into his job, we were going to a church, and they offered him to be part-time there on staff. So he was working 40 hours a week at his tech job, 10 hours at the church, and also volunteering for a Bible translation organization. And so he couldn't keep up with that. So we were at a point of what to do. And he was also offered a technology job through his school district that he grew up in. And so we decided, well, why don't we see in 1 month how much support we can raise and see if we can possibly do his work with Unfolding Word more full-time. So that was in 2014. In 1 month, we were 80% funded. So he quit his job. We turned down the school district job, and he began working 3/4 time with Unfolding Word and 1/4 time with the church that we were at. We did that for 3 years, and then he would fly to Orlando a lot for that's where they're based out of. And so his coworker / boss asked him, "Would you ever move here?" And we both were like, "No, not really. Like, that's not in our plan." And so, but then he came back from one of his meetings, and we both were kind of like, well, maybe. And so that was in May of 2017 when we first started to talk about maybe moving out to Orlando. And so I was 7 months pregnant with Eve. And we're like, well, let's just go for it and see if we get green lights. And so we, in 2 or 3 months, we sold our house. We bought a house remotely. I had never seen it till we moved. We had a baby, and we moved. First, we moved in with Jesse's parents again for a couple months, and then we moved here when she was 13 days old. We left a church that it was a bittersweet goodbye, but the Lord's provided so many friends. So, that was 1.5 years ago. That's what brought us here, and so now he's full-time at Unfolding Word. So that's kind of up to date, what's going on. I don't know what'll happen in the future with my cancer or whatever, but I just continue to trust in him. And I thought this verse was also very fitting, Romans 8:28. We know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. So I hope that's encouraging to you all. I'm sorry I'm crying, but just that, no matter what happens, you can trust God, and he will use it for good. And I never thought I'd be able to share, and so I'm grateful for this opportunity. That's my testimony.
Amen.